Greetings everyone and happy spring. It's hard to believe that the school year is already coming to a close and that this is our last Math Fix task together. I hope you've enjoyed these monthly challenges as much as I have and that they've satisfied your cravings for a simple yet challenging problem. So without further ado, let's jump into our last task.
Today's Math Fix is brought to you by S-CP.A.4, which asks students to construct and interpret two-way frequency tables of data when two categories are associated with each object being classified. They are also asked to use the two-way table as a sample space to decide if events are independent and to approximate conditional probabilities. Let's take a look at our problem today. Students are tasked with writing for their school newspaper about a series of interviews that was conducted by the school board about whether or not their town should build a new high school. The data is summarized in the given table, and they are asked what the headline for the article would be and why they chose it, as well as if any other headlines would make sense. So what would the best headline be? Let's find out. Students might first start with trying to answer perhaps the most obvious question. Should the school board recommend building a new high school? Here they might do some calculations based on the table and discover that 273 out of 515 eligible voters indicated yes. As this is 53% of the voters, students might write a headline like 53% of voters agree that the school board should recommend building a new high school. You might encourage students to think about streamlining their headline and providing more of a summary. They might then write something like voters likely to support building a new high school. From here, though, you might encourage students to look at the data more carefully and think about different demographics represented in the table provided. For example, how do older voters versus younger voters feel about the new high school? Here they need to define older and younger, and might choose, say, 41 and older to describe older voters. Given this, 132 out of 237 voters indicated they would not support building a new high school. As this is about 56%, students might say something like, older voters less likely to support building a new high school. If, however, students look at younger voters and define this as under 41, they will find that approximately 63% of voters said they would support building a new high school. And breaking this down even further, looking at the 18 to 25-year-old group, 61 out of 75 eligible voters, or 81%, indicated yes to building a new high school. This is an overwhelming difference from the older voters and might produce a headline that speaks to a generational difference, such as millennials very interested in building a new high school. Here it is important to ask students to think about why there might be an age discrepancy in terms of how voters in the different age categories voted. They might realize that the age groups used represent people with different interests, as, say, younger voters are more likely to have children in school than older voters, and therefore more of a vested interest. Finally, you may ask students to notice if there are any gender differences in how voters responded to the question. Looking at all male voters versus all females, we notice that male voters were split at just about 50-50, while slightly more females, 56%, responded yes. Here a headline could read something like, female voters more likely than male voters to support building a new high school. Of course, students can choose to get really granular in analyzing this table as well, thinking about female versus male voters in a particular category, but we would want to remind them that in crafting a newspaper headline, it's important to summarize all of the data. One extension here might be to provide data about the percentage of eligible voters in each age range that actually voted, i.e. only 25 of the eligible voters ages 18 to 25 voted. You could then ask students that if the voters in the next election turn out in similar numbers, whether or not they think the referendum will pass, and to explain why or why not.
And that's this month's Math Fix task, folks. We are so pleased that you've hung in there with us this school year, taking on each month's challenge like a pro. Have a wonderful rest of your school year. Until we meet again.